There's a very specific moment when something stops being alone. It's not a dramatic moment. There's no noise. It happens almost imperceptibly. A second presence appears, and the space between the two changes everything. Before, there was only one thing. Now, there are two. And that shift, as small as it seems, is not simply 1 plus 1. It's the beginning of something the one could never be on its own. Relationship. 2 is, at its most basic, the number that introduces difference. When only one exists, there's no comparison, no contrast, no distance, no encounter. One is whole in itself, but it's also alone in a very specific way. It has nothing to measure itself against, nothing to respond to, nothing to define itself beside. 2 arrives and changes that. It doesn't replace the one. It accompanies it. And in that company, something new appears. The possibility of connection. A simple image can help here. Picture a single point in space. Just that point. It has no direction, no reference, no way of knowing where it is because there's nothing else to compare it to. Now a second point appears. Suddenly, between the two, there's a possible line. There's a distance. There's a relationship. That second point doesn't take anything from the first. It gives it something that didn't exist before. Context, orientation, a sense of place. In symbolic numerology, 2 is associated with exactly that. The first encounter between two presences. It could be 2 ideas, 2 forces, 2 people, 2 moments, 2 paths. What matters isn't who or what those 2 things are, but what happens in the space that connects them and separates them at the same time. That in-between space is the territory of 2, and it's a far richer territory than it first appears. Duality is perhaps the earliest way human thought organized the world. Cold and heat, light and dark, near and far, up and down. Not because reality is actually divided into perfect pairs, but because comparing 2 things is one of the oldest and most useful mental operations there is. Before anyone could count to 10, before complex number systems existed, there was already one fundamental distinction. This and that. Here and there. Me and the other. 2 captures that operation. Not as an absolute truth about how the universe works, but as a way of seeing. A way of saying, there's one thing and there's another. And between them, there's a relationship worth paying attention to. That observation can take many forms. A scale is an object designed for thinking in terms of 2. 2 pans, 2 weights, a point of balance that's sought without any guarantee of being found. A conversation is 2 voices responding to each other, interrupting, listening, or going unheard. A door that can open or close is also an object of 2. 2 possible states, 2 choices, a threshold separating 2 spaces. 2 hands working together accomplish things one hand never could. Holding while the other tightens, guiding while the other follows, creating a tension that gives shape to something. 2 shows up in language with a frequency we rarely notice because we're so used to it. Heads and tails. There and back. Black and white? Yes or no? Before and after. These pairs don't describe reality with perfect precision, but they organize it. They give shape to something that would otherwise be too continuous, too fluid, too slippery to hold in thought. There's something about 2 that connects to the mirror. When something is reflected, it isn't duplicated exactly. The image is the same, but reversed. The right hand becomes the left. What was close appears far away. The reflection is a second presence, a visual echo that responds to the first, but isn't identical to it. In that small gap between a thing and its image, 2 plants a question without answering it. How similar are two things that seem alike? That question carries more weight than it appears to. Two people who think similarly don't think in exactly the same way. Two versions of the same decision don't carry equal weight from different angles. Two moments of silence don't mean the same thing depending on what came before and after. Two invites careful attention to those small but real differences that exist between things that seem equivalent or complementary. In its most constructive sense, two is often associated with cooperation, dialogue, diplomacy, and listening. There's a particular kind of sensitivity in thinking through the lens of two, the ability to consider another perspective, to resist assuming your own view is the only possible one, to look for a place where two different positions can coexist, or even enrich each other. An agreement between two parties doesn't mean neither one is right. It means they found a point where both can hold their ground at the same time. That search for balance is central to the symbolism of two, not as a state that's reached once and held forever, but as an ongoing practice, something that gets adjusted, negotiated, tended to. A scale doesn't stay balanced on its own. Someone has to keep watching the weights, correcting the tilt, noticing when one side starts taking too much. But two also has its own tension, and it's worth not overlooking it. When two paths lie ahead and neither seems clearly better than the other, indecision can set in. The difficulty of choosing a direction when both sides feel equally weighted. Two can become a place where someone gets stuck, looking back and forth without being able to take a step. That tension isn't a flaw in the number. It's part of what two describes. There are moments in life where there genuinely isn't a clear answer, where two options carry the same weight, where choosing means giving something up on the other side. Two can also suggest excessive dependence, the difficulty of functioning without the other, of finding one's own balance when all the searching is directed outward. Relationship is part of two, yes, but relationship doesn't replace the one. Two works best when each of its parts has a certain integrity of its own, when the encounter between them doesn't erase either one, but puts them in genuine contact. The idea of cooperation is worth sitting with for a moment. Cooperating doesn't mean agreeing on everything. It means finding a way for two distinct forces, each with their own direction, to work together towards something neither could reach alone. Two oxen pulling a plow don't pull in exactly the same way. One is stronger, the other more consistent. One tires sooner, the other keeps the pace. But together, they cut the furrow. The difference between them isn't a problem to solve. It's part of what makes the work function. In many symbolic traditions, two is also associated with rhythm. Not a single sound, but alternation. One beat, and then another. A pulse and its response. The heart beats in two strokes. Breathing has two moments. In and out. The day divides into light and dark. That binary rhythm isn't a forced metaphor. It's a real structure that organizes time into units the body and mind can follow. Two sits at the foundation of many rhythms because alternating between two states is the simplest way to create movement, to create time, to create life that moves forward. Understood this way, two isn't simply one thing alongside another. It's the first movement, the first response, the first possibility that something might change because there's now something else to interact with. Before two, there's no possible tension, no dialogue, no balance, because there's nothing to balance against. Two brings the question the one can never ask itself: how do I relate to what I am not? That question runs through many of the most complex situations in human experience. How to live alongside someone who thinks differently. How to make a decision when both options matter. How to find a point of balance between what you need and what the situation demands. How to truly listen instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. How to recognize in what's different not a threat, but a presence that completes something that couldn't be completed alone. 2 doesn't answer those questions. It installs them. It makes them visible. It gives them the shape of a number so they can be examined with a little distance, a little clarity. And that, in itself, is already a way of beginning to understand them. What 2 describes isn't the sum of 1 plus 1. It's the space that opens between 2 realities when they meet. A space that can be full of tension or agreement, difference or likeness, cooperation or resistance. But that, in any case, is where something happens. Where there's movement. Where there's relationship. Where there is, in the simplest and most profound sense of the word, encounter.